A drop of blood trickled from her lower lip as the entire first-class cabin fell into silence. Zoe Franklin stood frozen among the stunned looks, while flight attendant Bradley, who had just forcefully pulled her out of her seat, shook with trembling hands, staring intently at the sparkling platinum badge. You own 40% of Meridian Airlines." His voice cracked with fear. The entire cabin seemed to freeze. No one dared to speak. Less than 15 minutes ago, he and 2 colleagues had suspected, insulted, and pulled Zoe out of her seat in first class just because of her simple appearance and her skin. They didn't realize that this woman was more than just an ordinary passenger. She is the largest shareholder in the very airline they serve. And now, all eyes were on Zoe. No more doubt, no more pretending to be polite, only pure fear as they realize they've mistaken the wrong person. Leave a comment about where you're watching from. And don't forget to subscribe for more inspiring stories like this. 3 hours before everything fell apart on Meridian Flight 157, Zoe Franklin was standing quietly in the short-term parking lot at Seattle-Tacoma Airport. The weather was still misty. She wore a simple navy blue blouse, slightly faded jeans, and old white sneakers. No one recognized that petite, unassuming woman with natural hair tied up one of the wealthiest women in America. Not a single curious eye turned to look back, and Zoe likes it that way. She always believes that there's no better way to understand a business, especially one she's investing billions in, than to go undercover as a regular customer. 3 years ago, she secretly bought a 40% stake in Meridian Airlines when the airline was on the brink of bankruptcy. No one outside the top executives and a few lawyers knew she was the biggest shareholder. Even the current CEO, Richard Coleman, has never met her in person. On paper, Zoe Franklin appears through financial representatives. But in reality, she flies dozens of times a year on Meridian routes, sometimes in economy, sometimes in business class, or first class to personally test the quality of the service she's investing in. This time, she's in Seattle to finalize the purchase of a small but promising software company, an important piece in her strategy to expand her tech investment ecosystem. All the meetings are over. The deal is done. All she wants now is to relax in a first-class seat, sip some champagne, and head back peacefully to Atlanta. But she knows, with the simple outfit she's wearing, no one would guess her true class or status. She's not wearing diamond rings or designer handbags. The only ring on her finger is a thin, scratched silver band, a keepsake from her mother, a woman who worked 3 jobs at once in Southside Chicago to raise Zoe. It was her mother who taught Zoe that true value isn't measured by appearances. "My child doesn't need money to earn respect. All you need is intelligence and perseverance," her mother used to say. Those words have always been Zoe's guiding light from when she was a kid, until she became one of the most successful female CEOs in America. As she stepped into the first-class check-in counter at Meridian Airlines, Zoe smiled politely and handed over her ID and VIP membership card. She wasn't surprised when the clerk, a middle-aged blonde woman with a dull voice, frowned briefly at her simple outfit and instinctively said, "Economy check-in is over there on the left." Zoe calmly replied, "I'm flying first class." The staff member blinked, took her card, and examined it more thoroughly than necessary. She didn't apologize, simply said, "We need to verify further." For Zoe, this wasn't new. She'd been asked dozens of times to re-verify her ticket, seat, or ID just because she didn't look like a typical first-class passenger. Every time, she stayed silent, patiently waiting. But this time, something made her patience feel a little more fragile. Maybe it was because she was exhausted after a stressful week of work. Or maybe it was because of the clerk's look, one that didn't hide suspicion, as if Zoe was trying to fake her way through. After 5 minutes of verification, she got her ticket and card back. No words of thanks, no smile. She quietly walked past security, where once again she was randomly selected for extra screening. The black woman standing behind her, dressed sharply in a suit, looked at Zoe with an understanding look, as if sharing an unspoken tiredness. Whether they're billionaires or office workers, they all understand that feeling when you're seen as an exception in a place where you have every right to belong. Despite everything, Zoe stepped into the first-class lounge, but was stopped again. "Sorry, this is the lounge for first-class passengers," the concierge said politely, but coldly. Zoe showed her ticket and membership card. The concierge's expression instantly changed. "Very sorry. Please come in." Without saying more, Zoe knew this wouldn't be the end of it. But she couldn't have guessed that just a few hours later, that patient silence would give way to an unprecedented storm. Zoe slowly walked down the long corridor toward gate D23. She was used to curious glances, sideways judging looks. But that morning, the atmosphere at the boarding gate carried something heavier, more subdued. When the staff called for first-class passengers, Zoe stood up, adjusted her purse strap, and moved toward the priority lane. That's when she met Bradley Thompson. His flight attendant uniform was perfectly pressed, his gray hair neatly styled, and his cold, assessing eyes full of scrutiny. "Your boarding pass," he said, without a hint of a smile. Zoe handed over her ticket. Bradley stared intently at the print that said, "2A, first class," as if he was searching for a mistake. He glanced at Zoe, then looked at the ticket, then back at her, as if waiting for an explanation. "Is there a problem?" Zoe asked calmly. "No, nothing," Bradley replied. But the hesitation in his answer said everything. "Just, lately, there have been a few cases of using invalid reward points to upgrade." Zoe immediately understood his intention. Every time like this, they never ask directly. They imply, circle around, make assumptions that only target those who seem not quite right. She chuckled softly and replied, "I bought my ticket directly." He nodded awkwardly. "Have a good flight." Zoe stepped into the jetway, overhearing his whisper to another flight attendant. Another person thinking they're smarter than the system. Zoe didn't turn back, but she heard enough to understand they didn't trust she belonged here. In the first-class cabin, the third flight attendant, a young woman named Alyssa, led Zoe to seat 2A. The girl was a little startled, but quickly regained her professionalism. Zoe stowed her bag, sat down, and let out a deep breath. She was in her right place, at least on paper. But that sense of calm wouldn't last long. An older passenger, with carefully combed gray hair, wearing a pearl necklace and expensive perfume, approached. Evelyn Parker, 76 years old, a longtime customer of the airline. She stopped, looking Zoe up and down as if she just found a mistake in her perfect travel plans. "There might have been a mistake with the seat," she whispered, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. Bradley immediately stepped forward. "What's the issue, Ms. Parker?" "I had a window seat, not this one." She left the sentence hanging. Everyone understood what she wasn't saying. Zoe didn't react. She had been through enough situations like this that it didn't surprise her anymore. She just tightened her grip on the armrest. "I'll check again," Bradley said, without asking Zoe's opinion or waiting for system confirmation. He immediately moved Evelyn to another row, also a window seat, but at the back, far from Zoe. A few passengers quietly exchanged glances. No one said anything, but Zoe could feel it. The atmosphere had changed. A few minutes later, Bradley returned. "I need to see your boarding pass again," he said. Zoe looked at him without blinking. "You already scanned my ticket earlier." "Just to confirm." "The system can sometimes have errors," he said, in a steady tone, as if reading from a script. Zoe took her ticket out of her pocket and handed it to him. He stared intently at every detail, as if waiting to find some counterfeit evidence. "Indeed, it's 2A, he finally said, as if reluctantly accepting the truth. But then he added something that made Zoe purse her lips. "It's just, maybe someone made a mistake when booking the ticket. Maybe you were upgraded with reward points." This type of seat is usually reserved for high-level executives. Zoe raised an eyebrow. "So, you think I'm just any kind of passenger?" He didn't answer, just said, "I'll be back later," then walked away. Zoe watched him go, feeling heavy inside. This wasn't just an information check anymore. It was a statement to them. She doesn't belong here, and that doesn't come from just one person. It's from a system programmed to doubt anyone who looks like her, even if they hold a valid first-class ticket. As Zoe tried to stay calm, she had no idea a young passenger in economy class was quietly watching everything from behind a thin curtain in the first-class section. Her name is Melissa Chen, 29, an environmental lawyer living in Atlanta, all too familiar with those small moments of injustice that seem minor, but carry the weight of a whole system of prejudice. Melissa was unexpectedly upgraded to Economy Plus on this flight, thanks to a promotion. When she walked past Zoe boarding the plane, she noticed Bradley's scrutinizing look, how he unusually checked Zoe's ticket, then whispered to a colleague what happened afterward, when Evelyn Parker openly showed her discomfort, and Bradley kept double-checking seats, made Melissa feel so uneasy that her instinct was to secretly turn on her phone's camera, switch to covert recording mode, hiding behind a thick, open book. The first shots captured Zoe being checked for her ticket a second time, along with the cold and suspicious attitude of the flight attendants. Melissa stays silent. She knows she can't intervene right now without making things worse. But she also understands that sometimes evidence is the only thing that can reveal the truth when all words are denied. In the first-class cabin, Zoe tries to keep a calm face. She adjusts her seatbelt, looks out the window, and tells herself this is just a flight. Soon, everything will be over. But this silence is only temporary. From the front of the cabin, Bradley returns, this time accompanied by Diana Ross, the blonde flight attendant with a sharp look and a cold stare revealing her frustration. "Ma'am," Diana says, "we need to verify some system errors related to seat assignments." Zoe turns her head, still sitting in her position. "What kind of error? There might be a duplication due to system updates for upgrades," Diana replies steadily, but with an undertone. "My ticket isn't to upgrade," Zoe responds briefly. "I bought this seat 2 months ago." Diana doesn't say anything, but glances at Bradley, then says, "We'll need to ask you to step down to economy temporarily while we verify." That's when Melissa decided to press the record button hard. Every word, every facial expression, every look filled with prejudice is recorded. She zooms in to get clear faces of each person, because she knows, when it's time to testify, no one can deny the images. In the cabin, Zoe remains calm. "I won't leave this spot unless you provide a valid reason in writing." Bradley sighed, almost losing patience. "We're trying to keep everything smooth sailing. Don't make things more complicated." That statement, for Zoe, wasn't advice. It was an order implying stay silent. But Zoe was no longer the second-year student who had been yelled at by the police just for studying late in the library. She wasn't the black girl called up by the dean just for wearing sneakers to class. Now she's a mature, strong woman. And most importantly, she has the right. "I want to speak with the captain," Zoe replied. Diana scoffed. "That's not necessary. You just need to follow the rules." "No," Zoe emphasized. "I won't leave the seat I purchased. And if you try to force me, I will document everything and file a lawsuit for systemic discrimination." Then Melissa turned to the person sitting next to her, whispering, "She needs a witness." The man beside her shook his head, saying nothing. But Melissa didn't care. She recorded the video, adjusted the sound, and kept filming. In the first-class cabin, the confrontation was heating up. Zoe knew she was stepping into a confrontation she couldn't win, but she couldn't turn back, not this time, when her honor, the truth, and justice are all in her hands. The tension in the first-class cabin is getting tighter and tighter. Small conversations are starting to pop up among the passengers sitting near Zoe. A middle-aged white couple looks at each other and whispers to themselves. A young man sitting in front secretly glances back, his eyes filled with suspicion, but he's no longer completely indifferent like before. As Bradley and Diana continue to walk around closer to Zoe, dropping hints about temporary seat change, the mood inside the cabin has changed completely from the beginning. Discomfort spreads. No one can pretend they don't hear anymore. In the back row, a brown-skinned woman in office wear takes out her phone, places it on the tray in front, and tilts it toward Zoe. She doesn't say anything or draw attention, but she's started recording. No one knows her name, but her actions send a clear signal she's on the side of the unfairly treated. A few other passengers begin to look at the flight attendants with different eyes. An older woman softly sighs, puts down her magazine, and crosses her arms to observe. A middle-aged man nods at Zoe as she looks up, his eyes full of sympathy. It's Melissa, who's recording from the Economy Plus section, who feels the most noticeable change in the atmosphere. Even though all the passengers remain seated quietly, that silence is no longer complicity. It's waiting for a reason to speak up. When Diana came back for the third time, this time bringing along Tyler, a young flight attendant with a tense face, she tried to keep her tone calm. "Ms. Franklin, this is your final warning. If you don't move, we'll have to inform the captain." Zoe sat still, her gaze unwavering. "I will not move from my seat. My ticket is valid, and my seat has been confirmed at check-in. You're trying to force me out without a good reason. And you're being recorded." From the right side row, a deep male voice spoke up. "Sorry, but I'm a civil rights attorney. I just checked the airline's policy on their website. Passengers have the right to record interactions with staff if they feel they're being discriminated against." All eyes turned to that man. He adjusted his glasses and spoke calmly but clearly. "And from what I see, she hasn't done anything wrong." Bradley looked back at the man, a bit puzzled. For the first time, a passenger's voice publicly challenged the crew's decision. This sparked a wave of noticeable change. An older woman in seat 1C softly said, "Loud enough, I've seen this kind of thing happen too many times." Just because she's not dressed like the usual passengers sitting here, a black man in seat 3B, wearing a gray suit, nodded firmly. "I fly this route every month. No one's ever been asked for their ticket 3 times like this." Something's happening here. The whispers have turned into loud voices, and those words are starting to carry some weight. Melissa, from behind, softly smiles. The atmosphere inside the cabin has completely changed. She hasn't done anything wrong. That voice belongs to the black man in a gray suit sitting near the window in row 1B. He stands up and turns to face the entire cabin. "I'm a senior manager at a multinational corporation. I've taken over 300 flights in the past year, and I've never seen a passenger treated like this. If she's forced to leave her seat, I'll go down with her." The atmosphere suddenly feels like a wave crashing back. An elderly woman with gray hair sitting behind Zoe loudly says, "I'll leave the plane if they kick her out." This isn't how an airline should treat its customers. A young Asian businessman in seat 4A stands up, holding his phone. "I've recorded the entire process from the moment they questioned her for the first time. And I'll send this video to my lawyer if necessary. Jason, standing in the middle of the aisle, starts to feel like the situation is getting out of control. He looks at the other flight attendants as if waiting for instructions. But Bradley's face is turning purple, and he's gripping the back cabinet door tightly. Now, the atmosphere is no longer just between one person and the crew. This has become a stand of people fighting back against blatant injustice. A young woman, carrying a newborn on her chest, softly but firmly, says if any of you dare to touch her again, my child will be the first witness later when she's grown, to tell that justice begins in the first-class cabin. Her words cause some passengers to quietly applaud, filled with emotion, not loud, not shouting, but heavy with meaning. At this moment, Melissa Chen stands up, walks into the first-class cabin, holding her recording iPad. I'm an environmental lawyer, and I'm a valid ticketed passenger. I am recording all actions that could constitute racial discrimination. This is a legal warning. Everything you are doing is being recorded and will be used as evidence if necessary. Jason tries to keep control of the situation. Everyone, please stay calm. We are trying to resolve a technical issue. Technical issue. Melissa looks back at everyone. We all see clearly this isn't a technical problem. This is prejudice, a systematic insult, and today, that will no longer be ignored. Those words are like a spark. Passengers whisper, then gradually speak in unison. We stand with her. A group of passengers rises, blocking the aisle. An older man spreads his arms wide and loudly says, "If you want to force her out, you have to go through us first." Tyler, the youngest flight attendant, steps back with a look of fear on his face. He whispers something to Jason. Jason tightens his grip, his eyes flickering past Zoe, then scanning the entire cabin. There's no way to force her out of her seat without causing chaos. All the authority of the crew voice, uniform. Power has been eroded by a simple truth: everyone is being watched. Zoe remains seated, but her hand has opened her phone. A new message pops up from her senior assistant in Atlanta. The situation has reached the chairman of the board. They're watching the live stream online. Many accounts are sharing videos from this flight. Zoe doesn't smile, but her eyes light up. She's not alone. The truth is spreading. And that makes those who once thought they could wield power step back. Jason steps closer, lowering his voice. "Ms. Zoe, things have changed. I think maybe we need to have a private talk with the captain again." But this time, Zoe shakes her head. "I'm not going anywhere. And I don't need a private meeting either. Everything I need to say will be said here, in front of everyone who witnessed my insult." No one says anything. A young flight attendant approaches gently, placing a glass of water on the tray in front of Zoe, then bows her head slightly. She says nothing, but her eyes send a message. I stand with you. Unity, even in silence, has become an unbreakable barrier, and Zoe, without saying a word of encouragement, has sparked the strength of the entire passenger cabin through her calmness and unyielding dignity. A heavy silence fell over the first-class cabin after Zoe refused the private conversation. Jason stepped back, his gaze flickering between the pressure from the crew and the clear unity of the passengers. Every move from then on carried risks for the airline, for their personal reputation, and even for the safety of the flight itself. Zoe knew it was time to choose her moment. And that moment had arrived. She sat up straight, placed her water glass aside, and slowly opened her small handbag in front of her. Not a single unnecessary movement. Everyone watched as if hypnotized. From inside the sleek, luxurious leather cover, she pulled out a simple platinum card, not a wallet, not a loyalty card, but a type of card very few people have seen before. Carefully, Zoe took out the card. It's thin, metallic, with the Meridian Airlines stylized wing logo engraved in the center. Below the logo, a brief line reads, Zoe Franklin, strategic shareholder, 40% ownership. She didn't hold it up. She quietly placed the card on the tray, letting the soft LED light reflect off the metal surface, making the inscription shimmer. Bradley, who had just approached, froze when he saw the card. He squinted, tilting his head as if he couldn't believe his eyes. What? What is that? He stammered. Zoe didn't answer him. She turned to Jason and said, She's the chief flight attendant. Surely, she understands what this card means. Jason blinked, stepped closer, and held the card with both hands as if it were fragile. When her eyes glanced at the last line, her face went pale. Jason didn't dare to continue. Zoe nodded. Yes, I am the largest shareholder of Meridian Airlines. I own 40% of the shares in the company you're working for. And I've been sitting quietly from the start, watching how you handle first-class passengers without knowing who they really are. Murmurs spread through the cabin like an undercurrent. The passengers looked at each other, stunned. The man in seat 1B whispered, "Oh my God!" Melissa exclaimed. "Wow, you're the real owner here." Evelyn Parker, who had requested to change seats to avoid sitting next to Zoe, began to back away. Her eyes unfocused. Zoe continued, her voice calm but ringing like a bell in the thick atmosphere. I invested in Meridian Airlines 3 years ago, when the company was on the verge of bankruptcy. I didn't go to the press. I didn't appear on TV. I chose to stay anonymous and observe, and today, I've seen enough. Jason placed the card on the tray and stepped back as if touching something hot. Miss Franklin, I didn't know. Zoe interrupted her with a gentle shake of her head. You only dare treat me like this because you don't know any better. It's because I don't flaunt designer bags, wear diamond rings, or have bodyguards, so you think I don't belong here. That's why today I have to speak up. Zoe's eyes scanned the cabin. Not because I'm a shareholder, but because I'm a person. She points to the window, where the airplane's logo reflects the sunlight. This company isn't built to serve the privileges of a select few, but to bring everyone to their destination with dignity, safety, and respect. No one says a word. Jason, his face flushed, turns to Bradley. Do you know what's going on? Bradley doesn't answer. He lowers his head. Meanwhile, Diana turns her back, looking into the economy section as if searching for a way out. Zoe sits down, crossing her arms in front of her chest. Now I want to know, she says slowly, what you plan to do next. All eyes now turn to Jason. She takes a deep breath. We apologize. And we will leave this section immediately to avoid causing any more disruption. But Zoe isn't done. Not just an apology. I want you all to be suspended immediately. And I'll report everything to the executive board after we land. Jason nods. I'll report to headquarters right away. Zoe then looks at Melissa. Can you send me that video? Melissa nodded and handed me her phone. I'll send the original, unedited version, with clear audio. Zoe took it, her eyes softening. With clear audio, too. Zoe took the phone, her eyes gentle again. Thank you, not just for me, but for the truth. At that moment, the cockpit door opened. Captain David Reynolds appeared, looking confused as he sensed the change in atmosphere. Jason stepped quickly forward and whispered a few words. His eyes widened. When he saw Zoe and the platinum badge on the tray, he immediately moved closer. Ms. Franklin, I'm sorry. I didn't know. This is the fault of the entire crew." Zoe stood up and looked at him. "Not the fault of the whole crew, but a sign of the system you're operating." And at that very moment, Zoe Franklin's role was no longer just a passenger insulted. She now held the power to decide the fate of an airline. And the world was about to learn about this. The atmosphere in the first-class cabin was thick, as if all the passengers were holding their breath, waiting for the end. When Zoe Franklin sat in seat 2A, in front of her was Captain David Reynolds, trying to steady his still shocked face. Jason stood aside, not daring to speak. Meanwhile, Bradley and Diana quietly moved to the back of the cabin, their faces stiff, like people who had just pulled down their careers with their own hands. David raised his voice, stepped back to create some respectful space, and said, "Ms. Franklin, on behalf of the entire crew, I sincerely apologize for this unacceptable incident. I will urgently report to the control center and request immediate guidance from the board of directors." Zoe nodded gently. "I want everything documented thoroughly. And no one among those three should continue their duties until an official decision is made by management." David immediately activated the radio, clearly stating each word. "This is the captain of Flight 157. I am requesting a temporary suspension of all service rights for flight attendants, Bradley Thompson, Diana Ross, and Tyler Jenkins. Reason serious discriminatory behavior toward a senior shareholder, requesting a direct connection to the executive office immediately." While waiting for a response, Zoe picked up her phone and reopened the internal communication app reserved for major shareholders. The screen displayed a priority contact list: CEO, chairman of the board, HR director, and legal department head. She selected a group call to all four. The screen lit up immediately after 2 rings. The first person to appear was Richard Coleman, CEO of Meridian Airlines, who had personally come to Zoe's office 3 years ago to ask for the final investment needed to save the company from bankruptcy. Next to him was William Hargrove, chairman of the board, with silver hair and cold, piercing eyes. The other 2 were HR Director Patricia Reynolds and legal advisor Malcolm Knox. "Zoe," Richard spoke first, his voice tense. "We just received the report. What happened is totally unacceptable. We're urgently reviewing the entire situation, with Zoe maintaining a cold expression. No need for a review. I have full video, audio, and witness accounts. I was humiliated, questioned like a criminal, and forcibly removed from my rightful seat. If I weren't the owner of 40% of this company, I probably would have been dragged off the plane and escorted by airport security. We apologize. Truly sorry," Patricia quickly said. "I will immediately decide to suspend the 3 flight attendants and launch a full investigation." William nodded slowly. "Zoe, I agree that this behavior goes far beyond a simple rule violation. This is a strategic incident, affecting the company's reputation. I will convene an emergency board meeting this afternoon." Zoe interrupted, eyes fixed on the screen. "I not only demand suspensions, but also want a complete review of training procedures, the flight attendants' response policies, and how they treat passengers of color across the system. Today's incident isn't isolated. It's a symptom of a corporate culture that's rotting from within." Richard takes a deep breath. "She will have full cooperation from every department. I personally commit to monitoring the progress of the investigation." Zoe nodded, her voice deep but cold. "And I will oversee everything personally. If any of you hesitate, I can make the entire video public right now. As a strategic shareholder, I have enough shares to call an extraordinary general meeting, and if necessary, demand a restructuring of the entire management board." No one on the screen responded immediately. Their eyes were fixed on Zoe as if facing a power they once thought only existed in documents. Never in real life, Zoe continued. "This isn't just about a flight. It's a moral test for the entire system," William said slowly. "You will have all the oversight rights needed. And I promise, the dismissals will happen today." Richard interrupted. "Zoe, I hope we can turn this into a positive turning point together." Zoe looked him straight in the eye. "That depends on whether you're truly willing to change at the core or just handle things superficially." She ended the call and went back to the cabin. The passengers still looked at her, but their gazes had shifted, no longer with pity or curiosity, but with respect. And in that quiet moment, suddenly, applause erupted, starting from the woman holding a child, spreading through the cabin like a wave. Zoe Franklin was no longer the woman who had been insulted. She stood tall, representing everyone who had ever been pushed out of the place they truly belonged. 13 minutes after the video call between Zoe and Meridian Airlines management, an internal message was sent to the entire flight operations system. Flight 157. The first person to receive the information was Captain David Reynolds. After reading the notice, he looked over at Zoe, then immediately stood up, adjusted his hat, and signaled the rest of the crew to prepare for a special announcement. In the first-class cabin, passengers were still murmuring about what had just happened. Some began searching for information about Zoe Franklin on their phones. Within a few minutes, a series of results appeared. Zoe Franklin, founder of Cyberveil Software, a $4 billion sale deal, major strategic shareholder of Meridian Airlines, richest black woman under 40 in the U.S. But those details weren't as shocking as what happened next. Captain David reappeared in the aisle, holding a microphone, his clear voice echoing through the internal PA system. "Ladies and gentlemen, I am Captain David Reynolds. I would like to inform you that Meridian Airlines' senior management has made an urgent decision regarding today's incident. After verifying the evidence, 3 flight attendants, Bradley Thompson, Diana Ross, and Tyler Jenkins will be suspended immediately and asked to leave the plane before the flight continues." A gasp of shock erupted from the economy class. No one said anything in the first-class section, but many people's eyes started to look toward the back of the cabin, where the 3 people being mentioned earlier were standing silently. Bradley tightened his grip on the bag strap, his face turning pale. Diana quietly bowed her head, and Tyler, the youngest, stammered to Jason, "Is it true? Are they going to take us down right now?" "Are they going to take us down right now?" Jason didn't answer. He just lightly gestured toward the door. No one needed to say more. A clear message had been sent from the highest levels of the company, and it left no room for choice. Zoe sat still, saying nothing. She wasn't smiling. She couldn't smile when justice only arrived after suffering. But inside, she knew this was just the beginning. Bradley was the first to step into the aisle between the cabins, trying to keep his posture straight, eyes forward. But as he passed by seat 2A, he stopped. "Ms. Franklin," he said, his voice deep and tense. "I was just following procedure." Zoe looked up. "And your procedure is to ask a passenger 3 times, then whisper about her as if she's a fake, and then order forceful compliance because she doesn't look like an ordinary person sitting here." He was silent. "If that's the procedure, then not only should you be fired, you should be investigated." Bradley said nothing more and continued walking. Diana followed behind, her lips pressed tightly, her face emotionless. When she approached Zoe, she glanced over, but her eyes no longer held the coldness they had before. They trembled slightly. No apologies, just a quiet collapse. Tyler is the last one. He's young and confused. As he walks past, Zoe holds his gaze a little longer. "You still have a chance to make things right. Don't let yourself be on the wrong side next time," she says. Tyler nods, his lips trembling. "I'm sorry," he whispers. "I'm truly sorry." Those words, though late, are sincere. And for Zoe, That's the first time during this confrontation she's heard an unguarded apology. As all three leave the plane through the main door, airport ground staff are already waiting. A dressed in black executive stands by the jet bridge, holding a sign with the names of the three suspended individuals. No handcuffs, no guards, but no one needs any more signs to know this is a real disciplinary order. Inside, the air remains silent. Then, once again, applause echoes through the cabin. Not loud or dramatic, steady, serious, like a ritual saying goodbye to wrongdoing. A passenger stands up. "Thank you, Ms. Franklin." She didn't just protect herself, she made us feel respected. Zoe nods gently. No one should be insulted just because they're not dressed in expensive clothes. Or because of their skin color. That day on the plane, a disciplinary action never before seen in Meridian Airlines' history was carried out directly, in front of hundreds of passengers. But more importantly, a clear message has been sent where there's injustice. There's a chance to make a change. If someone has the courage to get started, after the three flight attendants left the plane, Meridian Airlines Flight 157 fell into a long silence. The heavy atmosphere for nearly 2 hours was gradually replaced by a feeling of relief, but beyond the quiet, something new was taking shape. Trust. Not trust in the system, but in people and individuals who dare to speak up, stand up, and defend right and wrong amidst the gray area of power and fear. Melissa Chen, who had been quietly recording from the start, stood up and moved toward Zoe as the fasten seatbelt sign lit up. She gently placed a folder of documents in Zoe's hand, the footage, the full transcript, and the authorization letter. "I think you'll need this." Zoe looked up, her eyes warm. "Thank you. Without you, this story might have gone silent like so many others." Melissa smiled softly. "I don't do this for her. I do it for myself and for those who come after me." That voice moved Zoe deeply. In a plane cabin, where everyone's eyes avert to avoid trouble, Melissa was the first to turn on her camera, and that small act, though simple, changed everything. As the new crew arrived and took their positions, the new head flight attendant, a man of Middle Eastern descent named Amir, approached Zoe and bowed slightly. "On behalf of the new flight crew, I want to apologize and congratulate you for maintaining your dignity in the face of adversity. We are truly honored to serve you for the rest of your journey." He handed her a small card. "This is a special thank you from the airline, issued rarely when a passenger helps change the company's history." Zoe opened the card. Inside was a handwritten message from CEO Richard Coleman. "Your bravery not only defends justice, but also preserves the dignity of an airline on the brink of disaster. We are grateful to you." Zoe folded the card and put it in her pocket. "You don't need a memento, but you'll keep it as proof that one person, just one, can change the course of an entire system." When the plane landed in Atlanta, ground staff received special orders. The entire disembarkation area was reserved for first-class passengers and those involved in the incident. The police were not present. Media outlets were kept outside, but a team from HR and legal was waiting at the gate. They didn't greet Zoe. They only greeted Melissa. Ms. Chen, a middle-aged man in a blue suit, said, "I am the head of legal. Thank you for your brave action. The management team wants to send an official thank you." Melissa was surprised, unsure how to respond. Zoe stepped forward, placing her hand on Melissa's shoulder. "You deserve it." Meanwhile, other passengers gradually left the plane, but not in the usual order. They stopped. Many of them turned back to Zoe, shaking her hand or simply nodding. An older woman pulled her suitcase closer and took Zoe's hand tightly. "I'm a retired teacher, and you've taught me the biggest lesson of my life. Don't stay silent anymore. A young man in an old hoodie whispered, "I used to think that first place wasn't for someone like me." Today, I realize I was wrong. Those words, each one, each look, each gentle touch on Zoe's shoulder felt like a silent current running through her. As Zoe stepped off the walkway, Jordan, her personal assistant, was already waiting. He didn't say anything, just gave her a brief hug, but his eyes were red with emotion. "Global PR is going crazy," Jordan whispered. "The video of you pulling the chair has 7 million views, and the video where you turned the tables has 12 million views in less than 6 hours." Zoe wasn't surprised. But what mattered to her wasn't the numbers. It was the reaction. "How are the responses?" Jordan nodded. 95% positive feedback. They're calling you a silent hero. Some human rights organizations want to award you a civilian medal." Zoe gently shook her head. "I don't do it to be honored. I do it to make sure those without a voice will never be silenced like I almost was." Melissa stepped forward. "And you've made that happen." That day, Meridian Airlines didn't just welcome a shareholder at the airport. They are welcoming a symbol, and Zoe Franklin's presence from the first-class lounge to the international terminal has become a symbol of a pivotal moment. It's not just about restoring dignity for someone who was insulted, but also about restoring respect for those who were pushed aside and denied the positions they deserve simply because others didn't recognize their true worth. 3 months after the incident that shook Meridian Airlines to its core, Zoe Franklin stands on the main stage of the new training center built by the airline in Atlanta. Behind her is a giant LED screen displaying the words "Graduation Ceremony for the First Class of Retraining Program." Respect and justice in every flight step. In front of her, nearly 200 young faces, diverse in ethnicity and culture, sit neatly in rows, all having completed what's considered the most significant transformation in Meridian Airlines' history. Zoe wears a simple, dark-colored blazer. No jewelry except her old silver ring from her mother. She doesn't need symbols of power. She is the symbol. "I know," Zoe begins, her voice deep but clear, "that many of you have seen or heard about the video recording of the incident on Flight 157, where a normal, humble black woman was doubted, insulted, and ultimately removed from her legally rightful position. No sound echoes in the auditorium. I am that woman," she continues, "and today, you are the ones who will make sure that this never happens again." She looks directly at the front row. "Because starting today, you're not just flight attendants. You are representatives of new culture, new values, and the courage to stand up for what's right." After the speech, the airline's HR director stepped onto the stage, holding a glass trophy engraved with the airline's logo. "We are honored to recognize Zoe Franklin for not only changing policies, but also redefining dignity in the airline industry." Zoe accepted the trophy with a gentle smile, but inside, she knew the award wasn't what mattered most. What touched her more was the shining eyes of the young trainees as they looked at her. They didn't see a millionaire woman. They saw someone who had suffered, who had been doubted, who had been excluded, and still chose to stand up. After the ceremony, Melissa Chen approached Zoe. She's no longer just an outside lawyer observing. Now, Melissa is the Director of Internal Audit and Passenger Equality at Meridian, a brand new department Zoe proposed and directly oversaw its creation. "Good news," Melissa said. 4 other airlines have asked us to share our training framework. They want to implement the anti-discrimination system you initiated." Zoe nodded softly, meaning we're not just changing one airline, we're changing the whole industry. Melissa smiles and then hands Zoe an envelope. It's from Ms. Evelyn Parker. Zoe looks a bit stunned as she opens it. Inside is a carefully handwritten letter. Evelyn apologizes for her behavior that day, admitting that switching seats wasn't because she preferred the window seat, but because of the unconscious bias she had carried for many years. She writes, "I've spent my whole life in first-class seats without ever asking who's been left behind. That day, you made me face myself, and I'm grateful for that." After reading, Zoe quietly tucks the letter into her inner pocket, not to forgive, but because it's a milestone, a proof of human capacity to change. As night falls over Atlanta, Zoe heads back to her private office on the top floor of the Meridian headquarters. On her desk sits a 3D printed airplane model with a butterfly symbol, the new logo, representing rebirth after crisis. She looks out at the sky, where planes continue to take off and land in a line, where passengers of all skin colors and backgrounds step aboard every day, hoping to reach their destination without the fear of judgment. On her phone, there's a message from her mother. "I watched the ceremony. Mom is proud of you, not because you succeeded, but because you never let pain turn you into a bitter person." Zoe laughs softly, tears welling up. Deep down, she knows she's no longer fighting just for herself. She's paving the way for an entire generation. On the wall, a new slogan for the company is displayed in brushed steel. "No one needs to appear valuable to be treated with dignity." And at the bottom, a small line reads, "The Legacy of Flight 157. Zoe Franklin steps to the window, her hand resting on the glass. Outside, another Meridian plane is rolling off the runway. This time, in first class, there might be someone who looks like her, simple, ordinary, but they'll never be questioned again. And that's the real victory. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more insightful and inspiring stories to come.